This is the controversial story of Chantal Mauduit, a woman who climbed the world's deadliest mountains but could never escape the storm surrounding her name. Some revered Chantal Mauduit as the fearless French woman who conquered K2, Lhotse, and Gasherbrum II, all without oxygen. Others whispered darker tales that she let others carry her loads, fix her ropes, and rescue her, then never acknowledged them. They called her the Black Widow, seductive, ruthless, untethered. And when tragedy finally struck high on Dhaulagiri in May 1998, it wasn't just the mountain that killed her, it was the name she left behind. Born in France near the Alps, Chantal's early life was shaped by winter sports. Her childhood was filled with the crisp air of the mountains and the rush of downhill skiing. But skiing wasn't enough. She yearned for something more extreme, something that demanded more from her body and soul. The physicality of skiing excited her, but it lacked the spiritual edge, the isolation, the fear, the intimacy with death that she would later find in climbing. She was drawn to the silence of high altitudes, the icy blue of glacial shadows, the sound of her breath echoing in the void. She often described the mountains as both cathedral and crucible. By her 20s, she was climbing ice routes that most men wouldn't dare touch, earning a reputation for both elegance and ruthlessness in her ascent. She became a certified mountain guide, and at 22, placed third in a European ice climbing competition, the only woman in the top ranks. It was a remarkable feat that set her apart and foreshadowed the trailblazing, turbulent path she would take. Those early victories weren't just trophies. They were declarations of independence and ambition. She was no longer just a local talent. She was a name beginning to echo through European climbing circles. Her ascent into the world of 8,000-meter peaks began in the Andes, where the mountains were remote, savage, and uncrowded. It was there that she honed her style and tested her endurance against thin air and brutal weather. Her ambition was clear and unwavering. She didn't just want to climb these mountains, she wanted to do it in the purest form possible. Alpine style. That meant no oxygen, minimal gear, and no fixed ropes or porters. She sought purity in every step, challenging both the elements and herself. It was not just a technical preference, but a philosophical one. For Chantal, the mountain was a mirror, and she wanted to face it without masks. In doing so, she elevated climbing to something beyond sport. It became a form of personal reckoning, an intimate confrontation with mortality. And yet, as she ascended physically, the myth around her began to grow in equal measure. She wasn't just climbing peaks, she was climbing into legend. And legends by nature carry contradictions. She was fearless and vulnerable, admired and attacked, often in the same breath. But with recognition came scrutiny. At base camps across the Himalayas, stories began to circulate. Whispers that Chantal wasn't carrying her own weight, literally or metaphorically. Some said she used her charm to have men carry her gear, fix her ropes, and even help her summit. On an Everest expedition in 1991, tensions escalated into a physical fight between two climbers vying for her attention. She had become both muse and menace. Around that time, she began dating American climber Thor Kieser. Their bond was intense, but like many things with Chantal, it came with conditions. They trained together, climbed together, and planned an ascent of Mount Fitzroy in Argentina. But just before the trip, Chantal told Thor she couldn't afford the ticket. He scrambled to take extra jobs and pay the cost, believing in the climb and in her. It was a pattern that would repeat. The emotional highs and lows that defined their relationship would soon be mirrored in the brutal terrain they attempted to conquer together. In Argentina, the climb was grueling, and so was their relationship. After failing to summit, Chantal allegedly gave Thor an ultimatum. If they reached the top on the next try, they could stay together. If not, it was over. Thor pushed through pain and exhaustion to lead the climb, correcting her mistakes as they ascended. But disaster struck. He fell 20 meters, breaking his arm and narrowly surviving. Chantal's response was cold and final. She told him she was climbing again the next morning, with someone else. Her parting words, "I no longer love you. Thor returned home devastated, began therapy, and was told to stay away from her. But the pull of Chantal and the mountains was too strong. When he heard she was planning a K2 expedition, he joined a Soviet-American team heading to the same peak. Whether to be near her or to prove something to himself, no one could say. Some suggested both. The expedition would test not only his endurance, but his emotional limits. What followed on K2 would only add to her legend and her notoriety. In 1992, Chantal joined a Swiss team bound for the peak of K2, known as the Savage Mountain. But when her team faltered, she made a fateful decision. Without permission, she defected to the Soviet-American group that included her ex-boyfriend Thor and his new partner, Ed via Sturs. Once again, Thor carried gear and laid ropes, while Chantal formed a new romantic connection with Ed. Climbers whispered that she let others do the heavy lifting, quite literally. She carried a feather-light pack, avoided setting up camps, and relied heavily on the labor of others. But when the summit day came, she stood on top of K2. It was a stunning achievement, but for many in the mountaineering world, the story behind it made her success hard to celebrate. The ethics of the climb were debated in hushed tones long after. Her name was spoken with a mixture of admiration and accusation, and with every retelling, the myth of Chantal Mauduit grew more layered and more divisive. Despite the growing cloud of criticism, Chantal's fame only grew. She climbed Shishapangma, Cho Oyu, Lhotse, and more. She became the face of elite, oxygen-free, female-led Himalayan climbing. Magazines featured her. Sponsors backed her. She spoke at conferences and inspired a new generation of female climbers. But behind the admiration was mounting resentment. Climbers accused her of ignoring rules, using shared ropes without helping fix them, and monopolizing the spotlight. Some claimed she took credit for summits that should have been shared. Still, Chantal never flinched. To her, jealousy explained everything. "They resent that a woman climbs better than they do," she once said. Her charisma and defiance made her both admired and feared, and perhaps, most importantly, remembered. For every critic, there was a devotee, and for every accusation, a defense. By 1998, she had her sights set on Dhaulagiri, the world's 7th highest mountain. She joined a team that included veteran Spanish climber Juanjo Gara. On May 13th, they reached the summit, but that night, tragedy struck. At 7,400 meters, Chantal died in her sleep, reportedly of high-altitude pulmonary edema. There were no signs of struggle, no dramatic fall, just silence. She passed quietly in her tent, near the top of the world she'd devoted her life to conquering. Her body was found the next morning, still in her sleeping bag, as though peacefully frozen in a final embrace with the mountains. The woman who had lived so fiercely died without spectacle. The mountains that had defined her life had taken her in the most quiet, undramatic way imaginable. Her death sparked debate that still hasn't quieted. Was she a pioneer or a pretender? A fearless climber or a brilliant manipulator? Some mourned her as a hero, a woman who refused to let gender stop her. Others called her reckless, even dangerous to those around her. But what no one could deny was that she changed the game. Chantal Mauduit lived and died on her own terms. She reached the heights most never dream of, and left behind a legend that still echoes in the world's highest places. Even in death, her name evoked strong opinions. She had become a symbol, a mirror in which the climbing world saw its values, flaws, and contradictions. And in that mirror, some saw glory, others warning. In the end, Chantal was neither saint nor villain. She was a paradox, strong yet dependent, brilliant yet divisive, fearless yet, perhaps, fatally flawed. The mountains took her in the end, but not before she etched her name into their icy faces, forever part of their story, and ours. Her story reminds us that greatness often walks hand in hand with controversy, and that legends are rarely simple. She climbed not just peaks but boundaries, of ethics, relationships, and endurance. And whether praised or condemned, she made sure the world would never forget her name. and perhaps that was the summit she sought all along.